All right, welcome everybody. We're extremely thankful to have you all here for our discussion today. We're thankful to be joined by Dave Dukowitz, David Sardinsky, and myself, Matt Gardner. I'm the marketing director for Lion Training Products. Dave Sardinsky is the sales director for the business and industry section of Lion, and Dave Dukowitz is the category sales manager for Lion Training Products. And together, this team has a wealth of knowledge and understanding about fire safety training, fire extinguisher training, and training in general when it comes to occupational health and safety and the fire service. And today, we really wanted to have a strong conversation regarding going beyond the basics. Just meeting the standards sometimes isn't enough. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a presentation. But today, guys, we just want to have an honest conversation regarding what people we see in the industry are doing to make their world a better place through increased training. Bear with me just a second. I'll pull that up. All right. So the first thing we want to just acknowledge is everybody out there pretty much knows the standard for us. For most people, OSHA is the standard in their workplace or their environment. And when it comes to fire safety in the workplace, especially fire extinguisher training, OSHA is the standard. We don't want to spend too much time discussing this. Obviously, people can go out and read this on their own. But it's interesting, and things that we often discuss and talk about with regard to the OSHA standard is just how vague it can be in some instances for people. It's not necessarily telling people exactly what they need to do, is it?
That's absolutely right, Matt. And most of the folks that we interact with on a daily basis, there's a combination of them recognizing either through an incident that happened on their end or a risk assessment that there's a major difference between training to the standard and having your folks be prepared for an emergency situation if, God forbid, they're facing that, and how do they react in that type of situation. And typically, when they look at that, the standard versus what they believe would need to happen for their folks to be better prepared, that's where they start to identify gaps and areas for improvement.
So it's almost like sometimes it takes something bad happening to stoke our minds into thinking, hey, what can we do differently? What is going to move the needle in actually making our training more valuable or making our people more prepared to handle an emergency situation? Dave Dukowitz, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about the statistics in the industry, about, what it means to catch a fire at the incipient stage.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of situations that folks run into out there as well. I'm just thinking of an anecdote of what I've run into. It kind of matches up. I'm thinking here as you guys are talking, matches up with what we're talking about here. We were with a customer once that was doing extinguisher training previously, and that's fine, working towards the pass technique. There was a situation where, unfortunately, they had to have a response for an emergency response at their location. But a decision was made on using an improper extinguisher. So there was an issue where, yes, they put the fire out, and that was great, and they were able to be, able to put that fire out. But there was still some issues that they ran into, kind of back to what Dave was earlier talking about interpreting and training to that for their individual locations. So yeah, a lot of issues out there, effective versus standard, if you will.
So Dave, in that scenario, and I know you probably can't share exactly who,
yeah, unfortunately.
But what was the change that they decided to make? What was the investment or the training? How did they beef up and go beyond just the basics? What did they do?
Yeah,
what was their
yeah,
action?
absolutely. There was an awareness piece that they wanted to work into this. And it wasn't just how to put the fire out, wasn't just the pass technique. It was what is that specific room as opposed to maybe a different spot in their facility. That room was, I'll use the term clean room. I think hopefully everyone gets what I'm talking about with that. But and understands what I'm trying to say, that they didn't want dry chem blowing off in that area. It was going to cause a lot of other issues. But they had multiple different styles of extinguishers that they had. So the result, what they moved towards now is that they would move towards a direction in a digital environment for digital training where they could lay out multiple different styles of extinguishers. So someone is making a decision now. It's not just a reaction. Now we're trying to pull out, the thinking aspect of what you need to be doing. So that's been great, effective training.
So it's essentially they found a way to train in the environment where the emergency was likely to occur using tools that were less, that weren't maybe traditional, right? And so they found a way to make their training more effective.
Yeah, and they were effective previously in that the incident was handled in the incipient stage, so excellent. But that bigger picture, right, of what is that next step of training? So yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good segue into what I wanted to kind of discuss next is like we're all used to like a pro forma or very traditional way that fire extinguisher training is done in our workplace, right? There's like we sit in an office, we listen to somebody talk, we might watch a video, and that might be the extent of a company's fire extinguisher training. That might be the basic. Or they might say, hey, uh, let's go get hands-on, and they'll go out to the parking lot, but they'll have constraints like, well, we got to call the fire department to come and be with us today, but fire department couldn't make it because there was a cat in a tree and they had to go. Or I like this image down the bottom right corner. I hear this all the time. We had fire extinguisher training. It was hands-on. Well, how many people got to train today? 3. But there was 50 people at the training. Well, we only had 3.
Yeah.
So I think that brings up a question, and Dave Sardinsky, I mean, I want your point of view on this. Is all hands-on training equal?
No, it's not. And when you think about training and hands-on training around this particular use case, it's something that I don't want to say it's easily overlooked, but it's something that this is a situation that everyone hopes doesn't happen. So in the grand scheme of things, as we're trying to be compliant and making sure that your folks are better prepared in a number of different areas, this unfortunately is an area where it sometimes gets overlooked, or based on the traditional ways that are pictured here, this involves lighting a live fire that, ultimately there's a level of uncontrollability about it. There's, burn restrictions in a lot of areas of the country and markets that we serve, or people just don't know the best way to go about doing things. So, and then it also has its limitations, like you said, of only a limited number of people being able to do the hands-on portion of it, where the other folks are seeing in that picture that you referred to, they're standing in the background watching. So they considered they were a participant, but were they really a participant? So that's where it goes back to that, that theme of what is effective and how do we keep folks engaged and how do you better prepare them to respond quickly and efficiently in the way that you want when they're faced with an emergency situation where, seconds matter of what you do or don't do.
So, and I just want to say to the audience, if you have a question or a comment or something that you want to bring up regarding this, please feel free to ask at any time. I want to take just a second, Dave, on that light. We had pulled something kind of out of the archives that we thought was an excellent example of a company or an organization, we'll call it. This example comes from the Fulton County Prison down in Georgia, who was already doing a really good job of training. They had training principles in place. They were doing a job. But due to an incident that occurred, they decided they needed to go to like the next level. It wasn't that they weren't already going beyond the basics, but in the continuous evolution of training, decided they needed something more. We got involved, and it was a great example of them going to the next level. And Dave, I think you have the video. I think it's worth playing this video, which can be found on YouTube, and we'll be happy to provide links to here. But it's just a really good example, a solid example of taking things to the next level.
Fulton County Sheriff's deputies are getting a hands-on lesson in how to put out a fire at the jail. Now, this training comes following a real live fire at the Rice Street facility over the winter. Now, Colonel Mark Adger is the chief jailer, and he invited us to come along. Sir, welcome back to Fulton today.
Hi, Shania. Thanks for having me.
So, Colonel, first things first, a lot of people didn't even know that there was a fire at the jail. What happened?
Yes, back in late November of 2014, we had a fire that was set by inmates in one of our maximum security housing units. The inmates had set the fire in order to cause us to have to evacuate them from that zone so that they could do some gang-related retaliations against other inmates. What they did not know was that the fire would soon get out of hand and that it would become a dangerous situation for themselves. And it caused us to have to evacuate the entire zone, indeed the entire pod, in order to keep everybody from the harm that was caused.
And so as a result of the fire and your response, you decided to do additional training.
Yes, we did. And basically, after any incident that we have or any drills that we perform, we like to do what's called a post-event or post-incident debriefing, where we talk about all the things that we did right and all the things that we did wrong. And one of the things that we noticed that even though the staff performed well, we had a number of inexperienced staff that because of the nature of the emergency tended to question whether or not they were doing the right thing. And we figured that perhaps we could include in their training in the future some experience that would alleviate some of the stress that's involved in doing something for the first time. So we purchased the simulation equipment so that we can simulate the stressful situation caused by smoke and fire and subject them to that before they actually have to respond to an actual emergency so that they can adjust themselves accordingly.
And sir, who did the training and who all had to be trained?
Well, we conduct in-house training here at the jail, and we also do training at the Fulton County Public Safety Training Center for all staff that's assigned to the jail. But essentially what we're going to do is this. All newly hired staff members will receive 1 week of training, 2 days of which will be the fire simulation training that we're doing now. And then all staff assigned to the jail will receive this training here at the jail over the next year until everyone has been retrained with the simulation equipment. And then thereafter, at least at a minimum, once a year, everybody will be trained at the training center during their in-service training week, so that this training is ongoing, is going to reoccur, and is going to reinforce the things that they've learned in the past.
And finally, your overall impressions now that the training is complete.
After doing a couple of demos with the new equipment when we first unpacked it and wanted to see how the equipment was going to perform, we brought in staff and we retrained them with the simulation equipment, and the impression was favorable. All the staff members remarked to us that they felt the training was realistic, that it put them in a situation that was safe but closely mimicked what would happen during an actual fire or smoke emergency, and they felt good that the training well prepared them to handle any situation that may occur in the future.
Colonel Mark Adger, great experience for us. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So, you know what's interesting there, Dave? Oh, there we go. What I really found, I picked up on this, and I've seen this video before, but I picked up on something. I think one of the most powerful things that they did in their, we'll call it the self-realization phase of this, was they talked to their people. When I was in the military, we would have called that the after-action review. Something happens, and you get together and you talk about what went well. And what he said, the voice of his people said that they didn't quite know what they were doing. And that must have been the moment that they realized we've got to go to the next level.
Yeah, if I could jump in,
Yeah.
that's getting that muscle memory. That's, and again, it's not just that idea, that past technique in a fire emergency, right? They, as you could watch that video, they had much more that as employees they had to be aware of in terms of safety for the facility and for themselves and their colleagues and those they're protecting. So yeah, this is all about muscle memory. So yeah, much more beyond, the basics, which I think is a great title for what we're talking here. Yeah.
some people might say like, oh, that's a prison. That's not my office, or that's not, the kitchen environment I work in. But I guarantee you, as a health and safety professional, there is something unique about where you work that is different or offsets you. It just is worth stopping and thinking about, do I want to wait for something to happen? Or do I want to think this through now and say, what is the next level of real training? And the phrase that always comes back to mind for me, and Dave Sardinsky, I'd love to know your opinion on this, is what's the ounce of prevention that is the pound of cure, or the 500 pounds of cure in these scenarios?
Yeah, and the great thing that every time I see this, it just illustrates the fact that, just training in general, anyone that has to develop a training program or they're responsible for training, it's, what are some common themes regardless of whatever the subject matter is? And it's the availability and the ability to be able to repeat what you need to do over and over again in an effective manner in order to be able to build that muscle memory. And that's something that obviously is a very specific use case, but to your point, everyone has their own specific use case, but giving you the flexibility to be able to create whatever scenario or environment that you're trying to do to make it as close to the real thing as possible. And in this type of situation, you have to take into effect that you can't create this thing that is going to be a dangerous situation, but how do you do that in a clean, safe, repeatable manner? And that's exactly what they were trying to do, reinforce that. And going back a little bit earlier in our conversation around that, traditional way of doing hands-on, I think it's widely recognized that regardless of whatever you're talking about for training, having some type of hands-on or interactive approach to that really reinforces the subject matter that you're talking about. And in that traditional way, all those folks that are standing up against the building, watching a couple other people do it, how effective is that? Are they really getting hands-on? Are they being able to repeat that? How many times can they repeat it before they run out of those couple extinguishers that they have? So that's the sort of thing that in this type of training environment, to be able to do that in a repeatable manner over and over again until you know how to react, where it's second nature to you, that's something that is of the utmost importance to folks that we're interacting with on a daily basis.
You just totally reminded me of a conversation I had this week. Well, it was actually a week ago. I had been down in Horry County, which is down by Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, and I was having a conversation with the fire prevention safety officer of the Horry County Fire Department. And he related to me the story of that they had been working with the local college that is there to do fire extinguisher training, and they had taken a digital bullseye panel into work with this college, and they took it into the dorm rooms, and they found that with each of the attending residents on each floor of the dorm rooms, they said, this is how the fire extinguisher works. Here's how you pull the pin. Here's, this is, and what they kept getting in that instance back was, I never knew how to do this. I had never touched this. I had never got hands-on. It's not just the workplace, it's the public, it's the community that surrounds us that we can serve by going beyond to the next level, right? Sometimes just the basic isn't enough for the public either.
Yeah.
And he shared with me another story. This is, I believe, out of Bowling Green University. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to verify this, but that there was a fire that was actually stopped, an incipient stage fire that was prevented based on advanced digital fire extinguisher training performed with this type of simulation system. And they had just performed the training 2 weeks prior. And the student who had taken this training stopped a fire, an incipient stage fire, at 3 a.m. and saved the lives of 450 people who were asleep at 4 a.m. And it was so critical at the university level because we all know college students, they sleep deep.
Yep. So couldn't agree more. I hear what you guys are talking about, that idea of that escalating approach, right? Taking a stepped approach to training. You see that, Matt, with what you're talking about, with that flexibility that the university has and the outcome, right? That success story is awesome. And then, we saw that just now with what was happening at the prison. They could do that simulated style of extinguisher training, but they factored in a victim. They factored in, they had to take that a step where they had to have, be wearing SCBA, but they could be doing that without that. They could add smoke, they could not add smoke. They could keep it basic. That flexibility, and hitting what you're talking about there, Matt, is just, it's paramount with going beyond the basics.
Well, we've really hit the top of our time right now, and I do want to take time to answer people's questions. So we're going to stop our general conversation there, and I do want to let everybody know that we're going to continue to this conversation. We'll be back next week, and I think that we're going to continue the conversation surrounding hands-on training and really what the effectiveness of that is. And so please join us next week for that conversation. And that being said, we'll be sending out more information on the Lion blog. We'll put these videos and information there for people to see. It's a resource for you to get great information that will help you in your workplace, your job, your career, and your community. Let's stop and take a couple of the questions from Jeff. Here we have a good question. He asks, why do you feel that the OSHA standards are so relaxed when it comes to defining the compliance with fire extinguisher training in the workplace? Do you guys think that's a true statement, or is it maybe a bit of a generalization there?
Yeah, I don't know. I get the spirit of the question. I don't know if it's necessarily relaxed, but again, I get the spirit of the question. To me, it's more of that interpretation for what needs to be done at that location. That's how I see it. Maybe not so much as relaxed. Dave, would you say something different?
I think I think you said it best as far as, a lot of these standards, they have to be general in the approach. So the general high level points that it's going to hit, and again, this is the minimum of what you need to do for anything. So it's having that exposure and initial training for your new hires as well as all your employees annually. So those are the key points that at the bare minimum you need to be doing. And then, going beyond that, there's so many different use cases that they generally, when you see, anyone familiar with these types of things knows that's about as detailed as they get for many of these standards, to just keep it to what the very high level points are for that.
I think that it's worth mentioning that the responsibility is not OSHA's to make sure we stay safe. The responsibility is ours. It's the organization's. That is where the liability occurs. It's one thing to be compliant. It's another thing to do the job.
Yeah.
That being said, we have one more question in the queue, and the question is, have you guys partnered with OSHA to certify your products for fire extinguisher training? That's something for the team here to field. That's not really something that I'll just leave that for you boys to answer.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in just to start it off. I mean, unfortunately, unfortunately, OSHA doesn't certify product. They just set a standard as the concept and the idea to work towards, not necessarily dictating this is the answer, which is good, right? Because that allows that flexibility to be able to really hone in for a location. To hone in on what they need to do, and on what step, what aspect, what are the training objectives? How do we want to do this training? Instead of being dictated, this is what you utilize to use the training.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's really been a great conversation. I look forward to the conversations to come. If you or anybody would like to be a guest on these webinars or have something you want to share with us, we absolutely invite you to reach out to us via the Lion website, or to reach out to any one of the Lion representatives that you may work with or see on LinkedIn. We love the conversation. We love furthering safety in the workplace, and that's what we're all about. That being said, thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.